And one of the ways that we can get rid of this discomfort is to get a quick hit of dopamine and just release it. So whatever drug, pick your drug of choice. But one of them for a lot of men is.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to episode 133 of the What's the Dill podcast. I'm your host, Pete Dill. And as I was talking about the past few weeks, I've been trying to branch out and do some more interviews. Y'all love the Joe Domina episode. Incredible story. Great guy. We're running it back with another awesome guy, Nick Red, a good man who has been involved in ministry for many, many years, has a great family, is an incredible story and a great guy. Nick, thank you so much for taking some time today and jumping on with me.
Thanks for having me, Pete. 133. Let's do it.
Dude, 133. We're 133 down to go. And, they say 134 is the kind of 134th time's the charm. You know what I mean?
When you really hit your stride.
That's what they said.
Dude,
they say.
We were talking before you press record, man. 2 years straight of doing this weekly is no joke. So I'm excited to be a part of the party.
I appreciate that. As I was saying, I really just try to put the attention to the process and, trust that these things kind of, the process is kind of where it's at rather than like the final product. And I've been really trying to enjoy the process while we're doing it.
100%. Love that.
Yeah, man. Dude. So Nick, for me and the viewers, I want to hear a little bit more about your story. Bring me back to your beginning years. I'd love to hear more about you growing up.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So from Alton, Illinois, sometimes I just say I'm from St. Louis. I'm right across the river in Illinois, home of the tallest man in the world, Robert Wadlow. That's like our claim to fame. He's dead, but he was very tall, 9 foot, basically just a hair under 9 foot tall. Alton, Illinois, raised in the church. I think one of the greatest gifts growing up that God gave me was my house, and then all around my block were my boys. Thomas, Joseph, Danny, Ben, and Tyler lived on the same block. In my backyard was a little valley. My dad built a baseball backstop, a couple soccer goals. We had some woods back behind there that we were always outside, and it was good, wholesome fun. Middle school started turning into hanging above Ben's garage, which we named Pawnum, which was all of our middle names, Pawnm. Patrick Allen Walter, I'm the W. Walter, Nicholas Walter Red. Patrick Allen Walter, Neil, and Michael. We were playing, some Texas Hold'em in middle school, and that turned into less wholesome fun. Not that Hold'em is too fun in middle school, but in high school. So I was raised in the church, raised through an incredible organization called Opus Dei. Really grateful for my time with Opus Dei. It's Latin for the work of God. St. Jose Maria founded that. I was raised in a very disciplined, traditional subset of the church. Again, very grateful for the discipline that was formed in me. If I am honest, I'm a feeler. I feel a lot. I've always had a sensitivity to the spiritual world. Spiritually sensitive, emotionally sensitive. I jokingly, but not jokingly, say I have a low pain tolerance. I'm physically sensitive. I'm just a sensitive guy, and so I felt a lot. I felt a lot growing up. I don't know if so I feel like in the law way of doing the church, I feel like my heart was kind of lost along the way. But growing up, I was, again, very grateful for my family. I have one brother, 3 sisters. I'm the fourth of 5. Very grateful for my dad and mom. They've done a lot from where they came from. My dad is the son of an alcoholic. 2 of his siblings, he's one of 4. 2 of them died pretty young of drug and alcohol abuse. Addiction has just been in my family, that family line for years, for generations. I never knew my grandpa. He died pretty young. So my dad, I never saw him drink growing up. So basically one of the things he said over the Red household is, and he said it with oftentimes not an insignificant amount of anger, and it was, Reds are alcoholics. Whoa.
Wow.
That's a sentence to live under. But early on, I could make excuses. I don't want to point, but I'm just, as I observe my story, my dad was kind of a rageaholic. He had a lot of pain in him. He was carrying that. I'm realizing now, looking back, it wasn't me. It was part of me that was triggering, spilling his cup, all the stupid
Mm-hmm.
stuff I was doing.
Yeah.
His anger would come out on me, and my brother physically kind of beat the crap out of me growing up. So I learned
Mm-hmm.
to numb really well. I felt a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was my role to be like the glue in the family. Um, yeah, within the family dynamic, and I learned to numb. So in high school, I learned to numb pretty good with alcohol and pot,
Mm-hmm.
porn, masturbation. Didn't date at all until college. I remember senior year when none of the Bonham guys did. None of us did. We just had our boys. We're like, we just need each other. I
Just the
remember
boys.
just the boys. And there's something to that, right? I
Yeah.
mean, who really needs to date in high school?
Yeah.
But I remember senior year, Tyler's parents were like, "You guys need girlfriends." We're like, "No, we don't. We got each other." So, I mean, but again, very formed in the faith. So,
Yes.
sophomore year, we were get this, man. We were going to the boys were going to get sophomore year going to confession every Saturday at St. Mary's at 4 o'clock. But mass wasn't until 4:15, so we'd hit up confession at St. Mary's, hop over to St. Peter and Paul, hit up 4:30 mass, and then go to my brother's house, who was 9 years older than me. He'd go take us to get some Keystone Lights and maybe some Keystone Ices and some Little Caesars hot and ready pizzas. And Saturday night, and we'd just start the party. So I'd
Right.
receive. I know I'm not supposed to receive the Eucharist when I'm not in the state of grace. So I would
Yeah.
check off the box. I'd receive, and then I'd be out of the quote state of grace all week until the next week. I was just like living the law. Senior
Yeah.
year comes, I graduate. I mean, stuff's just, I mean, the numbing. And again, I was just insecure, carried a
Sure.
lot of my own shame and pain, learned to numb. I found my numbing agents, my numbing medications. And then freshman year of college, I went to St. Louis University because my dad worked as a nurse over at the hospital. So that's just why I went there. I lasted 2 years at SLU. Go Billikens,
Pelicans.
some mythical good luck creature that's the mascot of a Catholic university. Kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So I lasted 2 years there. I got kicked out of my apartment, and I couldn't really go back there anymore. After my fifth year of college, hit a rock bottom. Just another late night out at the casino. Drove home. Shouldn't have been driving. I'm living back home with my parents. I'm 23 years old. I'm coming up to my front porch, and it's like 5:30 in the morning. My dad's about to leave for work, and so I step off to the side of the house. I see him in his scrubs with his backpack and his little lunch bag, going to work 12 hours in St. Louis, and then come home late that night. And so I'm convicted. I'm not totally sober, but losing a couple $1,000s at the casino helped sober me up a little bit, and so did the
Yeah.
drive home. And I'm thinking, what am I doing with my life? And I had those questions before, and the spirit had been convicting me, and I was raised right, and I knew that I what's right and what's wrong, but I had a really good ability to numb and to
Mm-hmm.
silence the voice of God and to medicate. And so I'm like, I'm just going to sleep this away. I go to bed at 6, I wake up at 8. 2 hours later ish, and I had a wild spiritual experience, and it was not the most enjoyable spiritual experience. It was kind of scary, kind of like sleep. What do you call that? Where you're
Paralysis.
like paralysis. You ever had that before, man?
I actually have one time. Yeah.
Dude, it feels nuts, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
terrifying.
Yeah.
So it was like that. Uh,
Oh my gosh.
I was like, I don't know how to explain it. Is it, spiritual experiences are often so dynamic, it's hard to put into words because they become sort of static. But I was laying there, couldn't talk, kind of terrified, felt dark. And I don't know, I don't think I did it, said it out loud, but I certainly said a prayer. It might have been out loud or it might have just been in my heart, but it was Jesus help me. And immediately I sat up and I could breathe, and I'm like, what's happening? A couple voices are playing in my head. One was my next door neighbor, Tom. Tom, one of the Ponham guys, and he'd been living
Mm-hmm.
back home. He was an Opus Dei supernumerary. He was going to Wash U Law School. He had his life pretty much straight and narrow, and he was encouraging me to talk to Father Sean. And the other voice in my head was Father Sean, who's a local priest. So I had to go to mass every Sunday with my mom. My dad worked every Sunday as a nurse. Like I said, he worked every Sunday. So, but my first Sunday back home, I'd been living home at this point for about 3 months. My first Sunday back home, I was bartending. My mom tried to get me out of bed to go to mass, and it wasn't happening. I was hungover, and just was not one to go. My dad gets home that night and he ripped
Mm.
into me. I will censor my language for the podcast, but he said basically in so many words, you get the F out of the house right now, or you go to mass every Sunday with your mother.
Wow.
And there were many other choice words as well. And
Right.
I said, yes, sir. So I had to go to mass every Sunday. I was going to mass every Sunday. By the grace of God, like I said, I was formed well. I wasn't receiving the Eucharist, which is interesting. But I wasn't going to confession. I was just living this life. And so I'd always go for a blessing. After mass, Father Sean, this younger, kind of charismatic personality of a priest, would always grab me and he'd say, Brother Nick, when are we going to get together? And
Mm.
I'm thinking, never, Father, like, no. And anyways, he kept giving me his card, and I had a stack of Father Sean cards at home. And anyways, I wake up after this wild experience, going to the casino, waking up, and I hear Father Sean's voice, and I try to go back to bed. I'm not going back to bed. Lay there for
Mm.
30 minutes. I end up calling Father Sean, and he says, yeah, just come on down to the office. And so I walk down St. Mary's in Alton, Illinois, in the summer of 2009, and he's like, so what's up? And we're just sitting in his office, and I don't know what to say. And I said, I don't know, Father.
Mm.
And I know you like edit out silences in podcasts, but so I won't keep 10 seconds of silence, but it's about 10 seconds of silence. And he's just
Mm.
staring at me, and I'm staring at him, and I don't know what to say, but he's not going to speak, I'm realizing. And the deafening silence is killing me.
Yeah.
So I said, Father, I drove home from the casino 3 hours ago, and I shouldn't have been driving. And then I just told him thing after thing. I broke up with my girlfriend of 4.5 years. A month ago, and it's been a dark summer. And I
Yeah.
just kept sharing and then eventually, after about a minute of that, he pulls out his little travel stole out of his pocket, throws it over his shoulders, and he says, "We're just going to turn this into a confession."
Oh.
So like, all right, yeah, we can do that. And so then next thing, I mean, the floodgates eventually open. I'm snot's coming out of my, all over the place. I'm crying. I got the good old ugly cry going on, and
Yeah.
I won't forget the words he said, and I get emotional when I think about it because it's like it happened today. But that's the power of just memory, man. It just becomes so real again. I remember I was on my knees in his office, and as I just let it all out, he said, "Welcome home, brother."
Mm.
And I think I know what he meant. He probably meant welcome home to the church. But what I felt and what I heard in that moment was like for the first time in my life, I felt at home, like in my own body,
Yeah.
like in this temple. I felt like I don't, because I'd always been walking around my whole life just like this facade, this artificial ego that I constructed,
Mm-hmm.
this, this avoidant attachment,
Mm.
fear of people, just
Mm.
like this terrified little boy. And for the first time in my life, I'm like, whoa. So my penance was to go next door to the church, say yes before the tabernacle. I did. Like, that's easy. So I went and said yes. Again, spiritual experience. I don't know how to, I didn't have any language at the time. I had no language at the time to put words to it, but whatever words you want to use. I mean, I was baptized in the Holy Spirit. I
Yeah.
was born again. I was regenerated.
Yeah.
It all, like, I go home. I'm like, outside, I walk outside. I'm like, man, the green is greener.
Right.
Like, the blue is bluer. Like, people are more people, or like everything was just real.
Wow.
That I bartended that night, then and I fell. I acted out. I don't need to go into all the details, but I woke up somewhere I didn't really think I should. Why I didn't think I'd ever be in this place. One of the biggest regrets of my life is losing my virginity to my girlfriend. But then anyways, I wake up at this place, and Father Sean calls me, and I'm in this pool of shame, and I ignore it, and I
Mm.
numb myself all day with alcohol. I'd love to say it was like a one-time thing, and now I'm like, great, but the battle was on, and I drank all day to numb the shame. And
Mm.
the next day, Father Sean called again, and he said, and I started talking, and eventually he cuts me off. He says, "Brother, you get that shame out of your voice, and you run to confession." And so for that was the summer before my 6th year of college. My first 2 years at SLU were victory laps, and Father Sean, he loved the hell out of me, and no shame ever. I had a powerful experience with the Eucharist, and he told me about Net Ministries.
Mm.
I laughed at him. Net Ministries National Evangelistic Team, or National Evangelization Teams. and told me about them. I was like, I want to run away and go to like Africa and do something over there and run away from my stuff. And he says, look into it. So I did 3 years with Net Ministries. I entered religious life on July 1st, 2013. I lasted 6 days
There you go.
and almost made it to the octave. And then I left and then was figuring out my life. And then January 2014, I started working with SPO. And so I've been in ministry for, 14, this is my 15th year, 20. Yeah. And so, then launched the Freedom Group with, my business partner, Joe, a year ago. And I know we'll talk some more about that. So
Yeah.
that's
I mean,
quick
first of all,
snapshot.
yeah, Nick. I mean, first of all, thank you for sharing all that. I
Yeah.
mean, like, that's such a powerful testimony. I mean, like, I'm just like listening, and I'm like, I mean, I'm relating to stuff you're saying. I feel like I'm
Yeah.
right there with you. You know, I feel like I
Yeah.
can sit with. I feel like I'm there. I feel like I was one of the boys, one of the Pawnham boys
Come
with you. You know what I
on.
mean? Like
What's your middle name?
Francis,
We can figure it out. We could
Fawnham. Yeah.
Pafanum.
I mean, and so we'll get into the Freedom Group. And one thing I wanted to kind of jump back in that
Yeah.
is I also grew up in a very, I would say, like structured community environment, very religious.
Yeah.
And I think something I've discovered about myself and also people grew up in these environments like upstate, like you're saying, and I want to get your thoughts on this, is like,
Yeah.
talk to me about the difference where like, you know, stuff in your head, but you
Yeah.
maybe don't have it in your heart. And that journey from like knowing the theology, knowing how to talk about, knowing the like not going to not receiving communion mortal sin, but is that really
Right.
deterring us
Right.
from sinning later? I don't know. Like, talk to me about
Right.
that like head versus heart dynamic as a young Catholic.
Until we come face to face with our human limitations and our complete inability, no theology is going to save me. No head concept is gonna
Mm,
get me out of my
yes.
muck.
Yes.
Until we experience that. I mean, you you've probably quoted this before, but I mean, Benedict talks about, Christianity is not the result of an ethical choice or a lofty idea, but it's an encounter with
Mm,
a person, with an event. And until you, and throughout the way, there's breadcrumbs, where I encountered God's presence in my life. I know I did, but I
yeah.
think until the pain becomes unbearable. And again, that we can bring the rock bottom up. We don't need to keep. You can keep digging.
Yeah.
The rock
Yeah.
bottom is there when you stop digging.
Yes.
But I think until we, and it's a grace of God that He can just bring. It's a revelation. I love that word too. It's removing the veil and just seeing. Whoa, and no matter who you are, no matter how quote good you have been, until
Yeah.
you see that you can't, and I think for the vast majority of us, it's live ammo training, it's the school of hard knocks, and it's coming
Mhm.
face to face with, man, that hurts,
Yeah.
and maybe they were right,
Yeah.
you
Yes.
know.
Yes. My
So
parents have
that's
gotten a
what
lot
comes to
smarter
mind.
nowadays.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
exactly.
You're kind of in the front lines of work with a lot of young men. You've worked with a lot of young men your whole past 15 years. What do you think is something that is stopping a guy from really having that encounter? Because we know Jesus is knocking on the door. What do you think is stopping young men from experiencing that encounter?
It's a really good question. One, I think witnesses to present that
Mm,
opportunity.
amen.
Um, Two, witnesses that actually uh, are attractive witnesses
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of scripts guys are like playing in their heads, or narratives they're living under, is like, if you want to pledge your allegiance to the king, if you want to pledge your allegiance to Jesus, that means you need to, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, I think C.S. Lewis says we castrate the gelding and bid him be fruitful. Like
Mm,
we as if with this thought, like we have to, um, yeah, downplay our virility or our masculinity, and that's not true at all, right? When you see who Jesus was and
mhm.
experience who He was, and that is presented to you, you start to get attracted to it. And when you
Mm,
see somebody living it, and for me, it was my next door neighbor Tom, as I mentioned.
yeah.
Opus Dei calls it the apostolate of friendship, and it's
Yeah.
just people being friends and just being there present. And when I hit my pain point, Thomas was there. So
Yeah.
I think attractive witnesses, um, guys that are like living all out. And the kingdom of God is not a matter of food and drink, as Paul says, but is righteousness, joy, and peace in the Holy Spirit.
Mm,
And we need that everywhere. We need that in business, in
amen.
government. My buddy I'm talking about is a state's attorney in Illinois. He is
Amen.
bringing the kingdom of God into politics. We
Yes.
need it in family, in culture. Like we need it everywhere. And there's no like, I think we kind of separate like the religious stuff and the secular stuff. But
Yeah.
Jesus has torn that veil. And when guys realize, wait, I can actually, I have the mind of Christ, and I have direct access to the most brilliant person who
Mm,
ever lived. I have his spirit living inside of me, and I can actually ask him questions on. I got a buddy who works for Boston Scientific. I don't know if he still does. This was like 3 years ago, and he's like, Nick, we're working on a heart pump, and this guy's name is Tony, and he's genius. But my team had been working for months, and we couldn't crack. I don't know the details, but couldn't
mm,
crack a code on this on how to fix this particular valve. And
mhm.
finally, I just asked Jesus,
Amen.
and he kind of gave me this download blueprint. I'm like, holy crap! And he designed it, and he was, I don't know if this is it, but he presented it to his boss, and he's like, his boss says, "Where'd you get this?" And he's like, "Uh, do you really want to know?" He's like, yeah. And he's like, well, I prayed and asked Jesus, and this is what came to mind. And it's not like this hyper spiritual thing, like the heavens opened,
Right.
and he's like, no, I actually believe I have the mind of Christ, so I'm going to ask him, and in my mind partnering with his mind, and write down what comes to mind. I'm not saying it quote works every time, but when people realize that like every part of my life can be more seasoned with salt and flavor and
Yes.
life and energy and light, it's just like game on.
Totally resonates with you, bro. And like honestly,
Yeah,
you're firing me up because I'm like,
yeah,
yes, like that
yeah,
the mind of Christ is within me. I'm like,
yeah,
heck yes, dude.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so if it sounds like your friend Thomas was a really great example for you, who are some other examples, whether like personally in your life or maybe like authors or writers, some people that you found inspiration from to like live radically as a man for Christ?
Mm-hmm. Authors that come to mind: John Eldridge,
Mm,
C.S. Lewis. Massive fan of Jordan Peterson.
okay.
I
Yeah.
think he's doing stuff for the kingdom of God
Mm,
more than a lot of Christians are,
right.
if I'm honest. It's
Yeah.
incredible. Father Sean, as I mentioned, one of my best bosses was a guy by the name of Dave Rinaldi. He's now the president of Net Ministries. I remember
Okay.
I was on staff my first year so I was on the ground missionary traveling, and then I did mission staff, and I was a supervisor. It was the first day of, we were kind of HR stuff all day long. Post lunch, I showed up for our meeting. I was like 3 minutes late. I walk in, and he said, I was the only one not there, and I showed up 3 minutes late, and he says, "You're late." I thought, shh. He goes, sit down. I was like, oh no. After the meetings, I, hey Nick, I love you. I had to make an example of you.
Yeah.
I wait for the first meeting for somebody to be late, and I just need to make an example. Like, he did it well, but it was pretty like direct.
Yeah.
But he has such an ability to be efficient and spirit led and joyful. And he cared a lot. He had an open door policy. Anybody can come at any point. And he was a brother to me. He was an older brother, but he was a brother. He opened up his life to me. He led with vulnerability. He was bold. Yeah, and he's still doing the missionary life, the mission work life. So just Dave Rinaldi, Mark Burcham, founder of of Net Ministries, rather.
Yeah. Mark Burcham.
Uh, Mark Burcham's the man. Again, similar things there. So those are a few people that come to mind.
I feel like part of the Christian life is that like, dude, we need help, we need support, we need
Yeah.
examples. I need
Mm-hmm.
you to help me. I need brothers to help me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not wimpy to be like, no, dude, we can't do this
Mm-hmm.
on our own. And
Yep.
we see that everyone, like when you try to do it on your own, you put the fillers in booze,
Yep.
drugs, sex, alcohol,
Yep.
whatever it
Yep.
is, you know,
Yep.
power, money. We
Yep.
try to put fillers in because we're trying to numb the fact we can't do it. And I think that's such a powerful example of being like, hey, your journey towards Christ was filled with guys helping you along the way and being there
Totally.
for you.
Yep, yep. Didn't do it on my own. No, that's right. And the pain is halved when you're walking in it with brothers, and the joy is doubled.
Yeah.
The
Amen.
experience is all, the pain is dulled, or the healing is available in the pain, even when there's others in it with you, and the joy and the life and the laughter and the successes, or have you seen the movie, The Dawn Wall?
No.
Okay, climbing movie. The two of these movies came out around the same time, a few years back. The Dawn Wall and Free Solo. Free Solo is nuts.
Yeah.
Guy climbed El Capitan. I mean, crazy. Have you seen that one?
Yeah, I saw that one.
Okay, the Dawn Wall. The storyline of the Dawn Wall is better. It's crazy. These guys climbed the Dawn Wall,
Okay.
and basically unassisted, and so they just did. Anyways, they did it in pairs, and they kept not being able to make this particular pass. Finally, this guy made it, and like after he made that pass, he was going to make it all the way, and he waited for his other guy to get it, and he finally couldn't do it. The guy's like, "Hey, just go all the way. You know what? I'm not going to be able to do it. You're like the world's best climber. Just do it, and we'll just you know, call it in." And he's like, "Okay." And so they started doing it, but he finally got hit. He's like, "I just realized if I did this by myself, it would not be worth it.
Right.
It'd be empty. We
Right.
got to go back and do it." So they went back down, and he made it, and he finally made it, and they did it. I'm like, that's freaking brotherhood, man. That's
Yes.
it. Yeah.
We're kind of getting into some of like the meat of your ministry. You talked about your story, you talked about kind of some things you see, some ways that guys can kind of maybe the need.
Yeah.
So walk me through the Freedom Group,
Yeah.
what it is and why you
Yeah.
started it.
Yeah, so part of it's my own story, part of it's Joe's story, and maybe we can get on him on here at some point too, and he can share some of
Yeah.
his details of his story, and
Sure.
you know, um, one of our favorite teachings is this guy named Adam Young talks about your kingdom and the purpose of counseling and the purpose of healing. He says it's not just healing for its own sake, but it's actually to rule and to reign as a king on
Mm,
this earth, to rule. It's JP2 would say self knowledge leading to self mastery, which is
mm,
where Stoicism, which I like some Stoic stuff, would
mhm,
end. But self knowledge leading to self mastery, culminating in what? Self gift. So I need to be a
mm,
king who lays down his life for others in his sphere of influence, and not power over others, but it's his power to bring into the world and to lift others up and to care for those in your realm. And but he says there's three questions he asks to kind of understand what is the kingdom that the Father wants to confer on me. And he
mhm,
says, "What do you love?" Talks about that. That's really important. Like, what do you uniquely love? And he breaks that open. What does he mean by that? What do you hate? He says we don't talk about hate enough in the
mm,
church. And like, what are you passionately like against and opposed? Like, what evil in this world do you particularly hate? And pay attention to
mm,
that. And then three, where have you been assaulted? Because
mm,
from the beginning, the enemy has had you in his crosshairs, and he knows your giftings, and he knows where you've been hit, and he wants to come, and he has a plan for your life, right? And he,
mm,
not to over index on that, but where have you been assaulted? Pay attention to those things, because in that might be some treasure that God wants you to mine and discover, because there might be a purpose and a call and a destiny in your life. And so for me, addiction has played out in various ways, and some of which I've already shared. But
mhm,
as Joe and I have been walking with men over the years, one thing that we've just come to see is like pornography and masturbation, particularly if we just try and like treat it as a spiritual or a moral issue, we
mhm.
can perpetuate the cycle of addiction.
Yeah.
At least in my own life. So just by way of example, so it's as we're recording this, it's Friday, and maybe it's Friday evening right now, and maybe I'm like getting a craving. I'm like, you know what? I can go to confession tomorrow. I'll
Mm,
release the pressure valve and act out right now, because I presume upon His grace that
right.
I can get back in the quote state of grace. I mean, I did this
Mhm.
my whole life.
Yeah.
The, or it's like Monday and I act out. It's like, I can't get to confession till Saturday. Well, I'm going to hell. Might as
Right.
well keep going to hell.
Right.
I was like, whoa, what does that do
Yes.
physiologically, psychologically, neurologically? So my background, I finally graduated with an exercise science degree. Joe's background is in neuroscience. So we're
Mm,
like, we are body, mind, and spirit, or body, soul, and spirit linked by the will and the intellect. We are a whole person. This is a whole person issue.
yeah.
And the spiritual reality, like a video that we dropped today in our curriculum, was on resentment and forgiveness. Like, that's a spiritual issue. That's a very big issue.
Mhm,
But the whole first part of our, and I don't need to dive into that yet necessarily, but we're like, So the journey that we kind of entered into and the freedom that we were able to get was a much more comprehensive approach. And
Mm-hmm.
both of us have been received a lot of tools over the years, whether it's inner healing stuff or even just the role of like nutrition
Yeah.
and exercise, like
Yeah.
and discipline, like that plays in your freedom from craving. And so we started dialoguing about a year and a half ago. We're like, man, let's build this thing. So we launched our first group just under a year ago. We started another group this past Sunday night. We got 8 guys, 6 to 8 guys per group, and we actually have a group of priests that we're doing in a month and a half. We got our first priest group going, so really excited for what this can turn into. But it's a much more comprehensive approach. We saw kind of as how did we get freedom. We started kind of putting kind of anchors in the along the way, like what was important, what helped, and just kind of brought it all into one package. So.
Wow. That's incredible. So for anyone listening right now, how can someone get involved before we kind of dive
Hmm.
more into details? Like if someone wants to get involved right now, how can someone get involved with the Freedom Group?
Yeah, if you want, yeah, that so the freedomgroup.co. If you go to the freedomgroup.com, that domain is taken. I think they asked like 15 grand to get it. So we're like, well, we don't need the M. The freedomgroup.co is the best place to find us. We got a 10 part e-course if people want to called Rewiring Your Brain. That people just want to, if they want to check out, they can check that out, or we can just hop on a discovery call. But yeah, our process, I mean, it's a year-long curriculum, and there's 3 phases. Phase one is all about how craving plays out in your body
Yeah.
and in your brain, and this kind of body mind connection. And we distinguish craving from temptation. We say
Mm,
that temptation more has to do with something like an external trigger that
mm,
that that lands on your prefrontal cortex, often in the form of an image
mm,
or an image pops into your mind in your imaginative part of your brain, which is your prefrontal cortex or your appraisal center, kind of the most human part of our brain, the most developed. And that's like an outside in sort of thing. A craving, what we define craving as, is psychological discomfort masquerading as sexual arousal. So what we
mm,
mean by that is like the limbic system, or like your amygdala, what's responsible for controlling fear and anger, or your fight or
mhm,
flight response.
mhm,
Most often, a lot of the experiences that we have with sexually acting out and sexual craving is simply psychological discomfort. What I mean by that is stress,
mhm.
anxiety, overwhelm, the frenetic pace of my day, constantly checking all these tabs, responding to all these texts, this conversation I had with my boss, this fear of conversation I need to have with my girlfriend or wife or friend or whatever it is. They build up and they begin to form these automation loops. And one of the ways that we can get rid of this discomfort is to get a quick hit of dopamine and just release it. So whatever drug, pick your drug of choice, but one of them for a lot of men is pornography and masturbation.
Mm,
And what they're looking, and so we start to habituate the cycle. And what they're looking for, what we think they're looking for is and there's a fantasy world there going on that, but most of all, guys just don't want to be uncomfortable. So
yeah.
we what we do is we distinguish craving from temptation. How is craving playing out in your body, in your mind, helping guys become aware? Let's just get
Mm,
curious
yes.
in your day. Awareness without judgment, because
Mm,
judgment and shame will get you nowhere.
yes.
Nowhere. It will never help you. So how do you get curious? How is this playing out? What can you learn? And how do we, and it's especially important not to, what we say is, flee from it or
Mm,
resist it. Because when we flee or resist something, like particularly like a craving,
mhm,
what our amygdala views it as a threat.
mm,
So when you see something as a threat and you resist it, you become more narrowed in on that and become more myopic in your vision. And so it actually builds. So what you view, so you feel this tension in your body or the situation, and how do you reframe it? How do you view this as an opportunity and it's actually not a threat? What if this isn't a threat? Whatever this is, and how do you fully feel it and welcome it? How do you practice presence? And even we talk about breath work and the power of breath work.
mm,
And breath is super important in prayer. I mean, C.S. Lewis talks about this in Screw Tape Letters. Just
yeah.
how to, he tells Screw Tape tells Wormwood to keep humans ignorant of how important a role the body and the breath plays in prayer, like really big deal. And so how do we become aware of it and let the neurochemical, so we have a thought, or we have a craving, or we have this discomfort, which can turn into a thought, which can turn into a chemical flowing in our body. How do we let that play out and just let it wash through our body? So there's a lot of science to it that we get through in phase one. Phase two is is basically looking under the iceberg. It's not about pornography. That's not the issue. Let's look under the hood.
Yeah.
So we talk about the father wound, the mother wound. We talk about a little bit of Jungian stuff on the shadow. We do some shadow work. We talk about, I think I mentioned earlier, forgiveness, resentment. Talk about how to engage your story, how engaging your story heals your brain, how to share your story. And then phase three is identity, purpose, and mission. What's your dream outcome? And it's ultimately to rule as a king. So what are your values? What are your ideals? What's the vision for your life? And how do we launch you forward? And we also have a fully comprehensive nutrition and fitness plan in it as well. It's all housed in an app. It's all online. So we do group coaching calls every week, because we believe it's really important that men heal in the context of community, what we were even talking about earlier. And so we might have, like just the other night with one of our groups, one guy shared for about 30 minutes. And not every guy got to, quote, share in that group. But even when one guy's getting curious about his story, oh man, as I look at that and I observe, I'm like, oh, there's a lot of me in that. And we're able to learn and to glean some insight from another guy's pain and discomfort and journey as well. So relational support, everyone has a freedom partner, a monthly coaching call with the freedom coach, and weekly group coaching calls. We have 5 daily habits. There's the thumbs up. Come on.
Come on.
We have, we should do 2 thumbs up. Does it do it here? Come on.
Oh,
Let it blow.
oh!
You didn't know that, man. Let's go.
Did not. That's incredible.
And if you're not watching on YouTube, people, we're just accessing the iPhone features of thumbs up and 2 thumbs up.
It's getting lit. So make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube.
That's right. Seize the opportunity. And so our the daily habits, the 5 daily habits that are tracked in the app, and then our craving and our curriculum or content that we drop every week for the guys. So it's a 12. Our offer is simple. Our offer is to get you free from the craving to pornography in a year or less, or we work with you for free until you are. So yeah, it's been there's a lot more to it than that. But it's a fully comprehensive approach. And you mentioned the process at the beginning of this video. The process is so flipping important. Last thing I'll say right now on this is, and when we hear this, well, submit to the process, be in the process, fall in love with the process. But there's something about that. It's not about just getting to the destination, because the destination's more healing, more freedom is always available. More growth is always available. That's the power of an ideal or a virtue, is you can never max it out. There's always more potential available. But in the importance of paying attention to the process and falling in love with the process in every day, because these are generic muscles. These muscles that we're working in the Freedom Group are the same muscles that are going to help you be a better husband, a better friend, a better brother, a better worker. I mean, it's mindset stuff. A lot of it's mindset. And how you do one thing is kind of how you do everything. But it's really dangerous. And we tell guys, don't worry about a streak. Don't try to get a streak. We're not trying to gamify this where you hit 30 days. That's not it. Because what happens if you lose your coin, right? If you act out, then you're back to square one. That's not true. Where there is some thought, and I've done my own 12-step work where you have 30 years of sobriety, or you're clean for 30 years, and you act out once, boom, you're back to square one.
Right.
So I mean, and they would even say, like, neurologically you're back at square one. And I would say, maybe if all you've done is white knuckled it and only thought about not acting out or not doing your thing, and you haven't done the deep interior, cognitive behavioral therapy sort of stuff. If you haven't done the reframing, if you haven't done the internal work, if you haven't changed internally, and let's just say for sake of hyperbole, where, for masturbation and porn, you just have your hands tied down for 30 years and you didn't act out. Well, you haven't done anything internally, any of the deep internal work, and that is the daily process, and falling in love with the process, and not as a masochistic way, but falling in love with suffering in a way. We're talking true, this theology of redemptive suffering that we have in the church is a freaking gold mine that I think we're still learning to mine. And what does it mean to suffer well? And where's the gift in suffering? And how can we let suffering and pain be the path, and discomfort be our teacher and really teach us stuff about ourselves. Like, oh man, and it's a lifelong journey, and it's never. We're not going to get there till the New Jerusalem,
Mm.
and then so yeah, that's a little bit about the freedom group. So if anybody's interested, we can not just hop on a discovery call, answer any questions, hear a little bit of what your what your story is, and how we could help.
This stuff you're talking about, the process,
Yeah,
the inner work, the healing, this can
yeah,
help everyone across the world. Like, this is not easy, I'm
uh-huh.
sure, to talk about, or like
Yeah,
for people to talk. This is not easy, but it's, I mean,
yeah,
world changing.
yeah. No, thanks for saying that, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited for what it could develop into, and we're holding it with open hands. Like if he wants to
Yeah.
just do whatever he wants to do with it, but I, in all humility, but also in all magnanimity, I do believe that he wants to change the world through the Freedom Group and change a lot of men's lives, because this world needs men who are willing to not just to die, but to live, to live
Yes.
for others who need him to live. So just grateful to be a part of it. Grateful for, yeah, him just plucking me out and saying, hey, I want you on my team.
Amen, dude. I mean, it's so honestly, dude, it's so inspiring. Like, I'm getting
Yeah.
fired up because
Yeah.
you're speaking, I think, a language um, that is needed in our church, which is
Mm,
like practical, masculine, powerful, and
mm,
unafraid in our
yeah.
church. And we need guys that are living like this. Final question, guy. Any advice for a guy? I'm a guy, and I'm like, hey, Nick, man, I'm need help. I'm struggling with these things. Struggling with booze, porn. I, struggle with my insecurity. I don't know. I have no direction in my life. Like,
Yeah.
just man to man. Like, what? I need some help, man. What would you say
Yeah.
to them? What advice you give to guys like this?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, out of all the tools we give guys, uh, the one is that is like, I would say it's the simplest, but hands down, like if you do this, this will get you the furthest. Is what we call it is a daily discomfort discovery call.
Mm,
It's a mouthful, but it's with your freedom partner. And so I would say find a guy. If you don't have anybody in your life, there it is again. If you don't have anybody, ask the Father to provide somebody. And it takes some vulnerability to say, "Hey, I need some help. Would you be willing to be? I mean, I know Exodus 90 calls them, I think, anchors. Would you be
mm,
willing to be my anchor? Would you be willing to hop on a call 10 minutes a day with me, or whatever, every other day?" And okay, and then so find a guy, find a brother that's willing to lock horns with you. And this is not nothing. It's like, maybe it's for a season. If you like, guys like time bound things, so say for like the next month. For the next month, would you be willing to do something with me? And hopefully he can bring something to the table too. But what we encourage guys to reflect on is, where are you experiencing psychological discomfort throughout your day? And paying attention,
mm,
getting curious, and then asking the question, what emotion is underneath that?
mm,
Where do you feel it in your body? So simply, I mean, this is like a live examination of conscience throughout your
mm,
day. And it's not just an examination of conscience, but it's an examination of my whole person. Like how are my circumstances affecting me and playing out in my body, in my mind, in my soul, spirit, and then just processing that with a guy. And
yeah,
guys want to fix other people.
yeah,
Don't do it. Simply help a guy get curious, ask
mm,
questions, tell me more about, practice sincere curiosity
yeah,
with your brother and with yourself. Hey, I'm curious. What is it about your boss that makes you feel like a 10-year-old boy inside?
mm,
What do you think that is? Where are you holding that in your chest, or where are you holding that in your body? Well, it's like it's in my shoulders or something. Okay, well, like, breathe into that. We'd go through a lot of this stuff. I'm kind of getting
yeah.
into some details here with our process, but find a guy that you're willing to be honest with, that's willing to walk with you, and find a consistent pace to walk with them at. So that's one thought that comes to mind.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a great thing to say, because it's a theme we've been talking about, which is like we need help in this journey. We need guys supporting each
Yeah,
other,
yeah,
in every aspect of our life and in
yeah,
that process.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
when Nick, this has been awesome, man. I appreciate you taking the time. I know I feel inspired. I know everyone's going to really be
yeah.
inspired by this. Again, if you want Joe and Nick to have a discovery call with them to learn more about the Freedom Group, go to the freedomgroup.co. Find them on Instagram, wherever other social medias, and seek help. We all need help, like we've been talking about. So that's kind of a message to everyone out there. Nick, yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate the time. Keep fighting the good fight, man.
Come on.
Yeah, man, dude, you're an inspiration, bro. And I'm excited to see where this goes and where you're going to go in the future, bro.
Love it. Thanks, Pete. Good to be out here.
All right, Nick. Peace, brother.
All
Bye,
right.
all y'all.
Bless,
Thank
bro.
you.